James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden, and we're going to return to a brewery that has now featured on the channel a couple of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the last little while, and I have to say this is one that I'm very curious to try. So for this review then we are going to go to a little place called Strömstad, which is quite close to the Norwegian border up on the west coast, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Fermenterarna. So this particular beer is called Keep On Climbing. It comes in at 6.5% ABV, and this one is a New England IPA. So yeah, very curious to see what this beer has in store for us. This one apparently is a single hop mosaic beer. But yeah, I really enjoyed the last IPA that I had from these guys. That had just a big hop flower on it, and it was simply called IPA. So yeah, that was the main reason that I ordered this one. And this beer was released as part of the Lokal Småskaligt assortment through Systembolaget for January of 2021. So yeah, like I said, really curious to see how this one turns out. Nice to have a few IPAs from these guys after, you know, quite a little while actually. I think it was mainly sour beers that I had from these guys for quite a while, come to think of it. So enjoying these New England IPAs from Fermenterarna, and this is a brewery that I would recommend you take a look at if you get the chance. I've been impressed with the last couple of beers that I've had from these guys actually. So yeah, nice to feature them on the channel once again, and as always I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this beer. So let's go for it then. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Fermenterarna before, and you will no doubt see more added to that list in the near future. I do have a sour beer to review from these guys in a couple of videos time, so keep your eyes out for that. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers I've reviewed for you. That's being added to quite regularly because, you know, just lots of Swedish beers out there at the moment, especially now that I've got a bit of a stockpile. But as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Fermenterarna then, on to my brewery notes. So Fermenterarna, as I've told you before, was founded by Niklas Aronsson and Anna Claesson, who founded the company back in 2018. So these guys are still fairly new to the Swedish beer scene. But the brewery can be found in Strömstad in Västra Götaland on the west coast of Sweden. They're actually very close to the Norwegian border, as I mentioned earlier. It's quite a famous little fishing town, if I remember rightly, and somewhere that I will need to stop off in on my next trip up to Norway. I need to get up to Norway again and try a few more different Norwegian beers actually. But apparently the whole story goes back to one day when Niklas ordered a beer in a bar one day without really knowing what it was, and it turned out that this beer was the Tropic Thunder from Dyggesbryggeri. And as those of you watching in Sweden will know, that one is a little bit of a cult classic in Sweden, particularly when it comes to sour beers. But this really just kind of set the ball rolling, if you like. But on the other hand, Anna has had a long interest in things that ferment, and she actually runs the Kostas Trädgårdar restaurant, and she's basically fermented various different things like sauerkraut and you know, sourdough bread and things like that for you know, for quite a long time actually. But this brewery started out with a very small 200 litre brew kit and some tanks, and then in late 2018 they took a break to kind of expand the company after their beers had been received very well at different beer festivals that they travelled to. But these days they boast a new facility with two 500 litre brew kits and a total tank capacity of around 17,000 litres, and they've been aiming to brew 50,000 litres over the course of 2019, but they say that they have the capacity to brew up to around 250,000 litres of beer per year, and I think they must be meeting somewhere around that kind of capacity just now, because their IPAs have been getting out there quite a little bit more, and it's kind of understanding actually, if you like, that it's kind of understandable, I should say, that they're brewing IPAs at the moment, because they want to kind of build their name a little bit, and then they can start to put the sour beers out there again. So I think the focus over the last little while has been on Getting a few IPAs out there these days. The last one that they did, just the beer that was simply called IPA, that went down very, very well. I was very impressed with that beer, I have to say, but I know that it went down very, very well throughout Sweden, and hopefully that helps them kind of boost their profile a little bit. But as I say, they are quite a well-respected brewery these days, so it's good to see that more and more people are becoming aware of them. But yeah, like I say, they can brew about 250,000 litres of beer per year at the moment, from what I understand, and according to Untappd, these guys have produced around 95 different beers as of January 2021 when I'm filming this review for you. So yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Fermenterarna at the moment. To translate the name into English, for those of you who are not Swedish speakers, it basically means the fermenters. Basically, you know, this is from my Swedish grammar lessons. Fermenterarna, you know, bestämt form, the fermenters, basically. So yeah, quite an interesting name. I'm surprised it wasn't taken already, to be honest, because, you know, in when these guys would have appeared in 2018, you know, the Swedish beer scene, that's about kind of 10 years or so. That's a good 10 years. Since more and more breweries really began to pop up. There are breweries that are older than that, right enough, you know, Opigårds, you know, Närke, Nynäshamn, things like that. But yeah, the last, you know, the 10 years before that, I'm surprised that that name wasn't actually taken, because it's quite a, you know, it's quite a straightforward one. I like it, actually. But yeah, so yeah, you always get some nice artwork on these cans as well. But like I say, that's all I can really tell you about Fermenterarna from the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, pretty good, I have to say. So yeah, let's just take a little look at the artwork of this beer before we open it up. There you can see the chameleon just kind of chilling in the tree. As I said in my unboxing video, chameleons are fascinating little creatures. And if I'm remembering rightly, because I taught the kids that I used to teach science to, I actually taught them about this, and if I remember rightly, chameleons have like little crystals in their skin that they can orientate in different ways, and they reflect different colours of light if you do this, of course, and that's how they camouflage themselves. So they're fascinating little creatures, actually, and you know, their eyes are very, very kind of sensitive as well. You know, both eyes can move independently and look in different directions, so it's pretty interesting. But yeah, this one, as I say, called Keep On Climbing, 6.5% single hop New England IPA, Mosaic. As we know, Mosaic, an American hop, about 13 to 14% alpha acid, lots of lovely kind of tangerine flavours from it. Sometimes you can get a wee bit of a kind of tropical note out of it as well. You know, I think it was a little bit of pineapple that you can sometimes get, but this one contains wheat and oats in it. But yeah, the last beer I had from these guys I thought was really, really you know, really nice drinking. But I'll just let you have a little look at the side of the can there. There you can see this little symbol. Oh, wrong hand. Nope, wrong hand. There we go. This one here, that is the Fermenterarna symbol, actually. But yeah, there's also a brewery called Fermentariet, I should say, in Sweden, so you have to be careful you don't mix these two up. But yeah, 6.5% ABV this one, 440ml can. This beer I think cost me 50, about 40, either 45 or 50 Swedish kroner. So to translate that, roughly about €5, maybe about £4, a little bit more than £4 sterling. And for those of you in the States, that will be roughly about $5.50, something like that. But yeah, really nicely presented beer. This one, you always get that. But let's get it out and we'll get on with the tasting then. I'm very, very curious to see what this beer has in store for us. So let's go for it. Let's go for it. Yep, there we go, there we go. Okay, that's pouring very nicely. I think that'll be enough for the moment. We'll put the last little bit in just before we go and taste the beer. Actually, my fridge is very cold. I can feel the coldness on my hand already. But yeah, as you can see, and as you would expect with this beer, that's actually got a little bit more of a kind of natural haze type vibe to it. I'm wondering when we put the last of it in if that'll stay there. But it actually has a little bit more of a kind of natural haze thing to it, like a West Coast IPA, a little bit like that, rather than being, you know, a kind of ultra hazy kind of New England sort of thing. So yeah. But yeah, you can see that this beer is poured a lovely kind of quite bright yellow colour. You can see there's a solid half finger of a frothy, I would say perfect white head on this one. There's one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass. A few little ones going up towards the bottom of that head there. But I mean, overall, it does look pretty damn nice, I have to say. But yeah, I would say that this beer has a more kind of natural haze type vibe to it than a, you know, out and out haze for days kind of things, as Rob Hopsine would call it. But yeah, it looks very, very nice, but nothing overly surprising about this beer in terms of its appearance when you consider what style it is. I would describe it as a very bright yellow, sort of mango juice colour. I always like comparing these kind of hazier IPAs these days to you know, different fruit juices and things. I think that's a very good kind of point of reference to have. Different beer tubers will use different things, of course, because everyone has their own point of reference, or frame of reference I should say. I should use the physics term. But yeah, nicely done, nicely presented. So let's take a closer look at the aroma then and just see how we got on. You can see the head is just fading away to be a very kind of thin foamy layer, but let's have a look at this then. That's very nice. That is very, very nice. I mean, straight away with this beer, again, it reminds me of the last one that we had from them. Let's just see if we can get the rest of this in. Let me just sugar it up a little bit, maybe. Ah, there you go. Maybe it's a little bit more hazy, but not madly. But yeah, with this beer, again, it smells very, very smooth actually. So yeah, you get a lovely kind of soft, smooth, white bready character out of this one. You know, there's quite a few different directions you can take IPAs in these days. They can be a bit more yeasty and farmhousey, they can be a little bit more rye orientated and kind of grainy, they can be oat leaning, they can be, you know, white bready, barley malt leaning, they can be, what one have we missed? They can be wheat leaning perhaps, and they also can be a little bit more kind of sweet and brown sugary actually. So there's kind of 6 or so directions you can take these New England IPAs in, and it's always interesting to go from brewery to brewery and just see what they like to do. But I remember the last one from these guys was like very, very smooth, and it had a little bit of oatiness to it, it had a little bit of, you know, kind of barley malt breadiness, but it also had a wee bit of kind of yeastiness and wheaty quality in there. And again, this one just comes across as really well balanced in its malt base, and I can see it has gotten a little bit more hazy, this one, since I put the last little bit of stuff into it. But you know, again, it's kind of what you would expect from a sort of New England kind of hazy type IPA, to be honest with you. So I'm not overly kind of surprised by the appearance of this beer, to be quite honest with you. But it smells lovely, this one. So in the malt base, I think the backbone of the beer is that kind of soft, you know, very fresh, white bready kind of vibe. Absolutely, I would definitely say that about this beer. If you take the aroma in a little bit more deeply, you do get a wee bit of that. You know, you get a little bit of wheat out of this one, but not a lot. This is definitely not a wheaty leaning New England IPA. Overwhelmingly, I think, soft white bread. There's a wee bit of a kind of oaty note to it. You can get a little bit of that smoothness and almost slight sweetness of the oats. But there's also just a wee tiny touch of a kind of, there's a very light brown sugar in this one. But to me, the malt base in this beer comes across as sort of quite old school Swedish, if that makes sense. The malt base in this is quite close to what you would expect of the likes of O.O. Narangi, Stigbergets Amazing Haze. This strikes me as being a kind of old school sort of Swedish West Coast IPA. It's not got too much sweetness in it, not too much kind of like Werther's Original butter candy type thing. It's really a little bit oaty, kind of soft white bread. That's the main component of the malt base in this one. Although in fairness, I would say that as you smell it a little bit more, you will get a wee bit more kind of sweetness out of it, if that makes sense. So definitely take a little bit of time to to kind of enjoy that actually. So yeah, the malt base is again quite solid in this. I remember the last IPA being quite soft in that sense, and this one seems to be following the same vibe, but you can't blame them for that. The other beer went down very well. You know, they're going to use something similar because it's worked for them in the past. So not that it's a bad thing, of course. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, you get a little touch of earthiness out of this one, which is something you'd expect from Mosaic. You have some nice kind of floral aromaticity, absolutely. Again, these are things you would expect of Mosaic. Mosaic is normally 13 to 14% alpha acid, and then you've also got a nice little bit of a lighter kind of grassiness coming out of the beer as well actually, which I think is quite nice. I think the green component of this beer again suits the kind of malty backbone that the beer has. On top of that though, you get a lovely kind of juicy tangerine note out of it. It's quite a bright orange, if that makes sense, not too kind of big and oily. If it was Amarillo that was in here, you'd expect it to be a lot more kind of oily. If it was a Zaka, it would be a little bit sharper and more like you know, a little bit more kind of mandarin-y, if that makes sense. But yeah, there's a lot of lovely kind of just juicy tangerine notes in this one. There's, you know, there's one or two little things you might get a wee hint of, like pineapple or, you know, something like that. I always find that if you use Mosaic on its own, it will give you just a little hint of like a tropical pineapple or something. But otherwise, otherwise this beer is just very kind of juicy and orangey. It smells like a very straight shooting beer in a lot of ways, but you know, quite often that's never a bad thing. Single hop beers, you have to have a good base for the single hop beers to work. But I have to say, I'm sort of quietly confident that Fermenterarna will have pulled this off quite well. But as I always say, take a little bit of time to enjoy the aroma of this one. I think what we've said already kind of covers it quite well. So let's get stuck into it and see how this beer tastes. So this one is the Keep On Climbing. Am I calling it right? Yeah, Keep On Climbing. At 6.5% ABV, single hop Mosaic New England IPA from Fermenterarna in Strömstad, very close to the Norwegian border in the northern part of the Swedish west coast. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers. Yeah. That is very, very nice. Again, just because of how long it's taken me to get back to Sweden and stuff, you can tell that this one is not in its absolute prime. It's kind of getting towards the end of its kind of prime, if that makes sense. But it does come across very, very well. And I'm sure when it was when it was in its freshest, it would have been, you know, really, really good. Even as it stands up very, very well. I ordered these beers thinking that I would be back on like the 10th or 11th and we'd be able to pick them up straight away. But you know, unfortunately they ended up sitting for 2 weeks. But even then, it's still in good condition. They were in the fridge, they were kept dark, and they are still in good condition. So no need to worry about that. But we're basically rattling through the IPAs that I ordered this time before my February beers arrive. But yeah, this is really nicely executed, I have to say. So thumbs up to Fermenterarna for this beer. I think this is beautifully done. And again, it kind of shows you what this brewery are all about. I find this one very slick. It's got a wee touch of oiliness to it, but for the most part, it's actually quite a slick beer in a lot of ways, which I really quite like. So yeah, the vibe that you get with this beer, I think, is very, very nice. So yeah, it's absolutely solid. I mean, I'm just going to say thumbs up to Fermenterarna. I think this is beautifully done. I'd love, with this base that they've got, I'd love to see them do this with like Enigma. I think this could be a very interesting beer for them to do with like Enigma, or maybe Talus or Sabro. Sabro could work very well with this as well. So yeah, the base, I think they're obviously using the base from the original IPA, I think, or something very, very similar. But you know, who can blame them for that? I think they've done it really nicely. That's absolutely solid. This beer's up there with, you know, who can we compare this? This beer's up there with the things you're getting from 10 Hands and Apex and stuff like that. These guys know what they're doing with IPAs. So yeah, absolutely. So yeah, let's try and break this beer down then. I will say as well, the other thing, the wheat is a little bit more prominent in this one, but this beer's got it kind of balances the wetness and the slickness quite well. So with this beer then, there's a very, very nice sort of how would you say? There's a nice kind of soft. I would say you do get a little bit of that kind of soft white bready sort of thing. That blankets the middle of your palate, but again, it feels quite light and quite crisp in some ways. So as you go towards the back third of your tongue, in that border region between middle and back third of your palate, there's a good little bit of kind of bread crusty quality to the beer, and as you go into the back third of your palate, you've got a good little bit of kind of wheaty bitiness coming out of it. So I really like how that goes together in this beer, absolutely. Yeah, I mean the wheat The wheat in this beer is, you can feel it just giving the beer a little bit more kind of thickness on that back third of the palate. But again, I really find this beer to be very kind of slick in a lot of ways. The malt base has a lot of flavour to it, but it doesn't feel overly kind of thick, if that makes sense. It's a really, there's a real slickness to this beer, come to think of it, and I really like how that that kind of pieces together in this one. So yeah, it's very interesting in that sense. So yeah, the back third of your palate, you've got a good little bit of wheatiness there. You can feel that the beer is slightly thicker, but again, I find it quite slick in a lot of ways. So as you move further forward and you reach that kind of border region, you can feel the thickness of the beer just drops away. Then underneath in that middle third of the palate, there's a nice slightly crisp white bready character there. As the flavour develops a little bit more, you can feel the kind of oatiness. There is a little bit of a kind of, there's a sort of circle, if you like, of oatiness there, and it's got a good little bit of kind of slickness coming out of it as well. It's not an overly thick oaty quality there, but it just adds a little kind of thin layer, if you like, and it gives the beer a little bit more slickness and kind of smoothness, and you can feel that the oaty character's just developing a little bit of sweetness the further you go into the beer as well. So yeah, in the middle of your palate then, there is a little bit of sweetness out of this one. You've got a nice kind of sweet, you've got a little bit of a kind of sweet, it's almost a little bit biscuity. It's like a little bit, you do get a little bit of that kind of butter candy Werther's Original sort of thing out of the beer, but then as you move further away from the centre of your palate, it gets a little bit more McVitie's digestive like. But I do want to emphasise with this beer that the malty side of this one is not, it doesn't feel that thick. It is, you know, one of the, I don't want to say thin either because that comes across as negative. It's quite a, it really is like a very slick malt base you get out of this beer, and you can feel it does develop a little bit of kind of punchiness, if you like, and a little bit of bitiness the further you go into the aftertaste. But again, this is just a very well executed beer. It's very straight shooting, very well executed, and I can't emphasise that enough with it. And again, thumbs up to Fermenterarna on this one. But I think that covers the malt base quite well on this one, actually. I think it's quite nice. And the further you go into the aftertaste, you get a bit more of the wheat, you get a bit more of the kind of you just get a little bit more bite out of this beer. I think this one does start to become more and more wheaty leaning the further that you go into the aftertaste with it. But yeah, let's focus on the hoppy side of things then. Back corners of the palate, there's a nice little bit of earthiness coming out of the beer, which is what you'd expect with Mosaic. Mosaic does have a little bit of earthiness, but as you move further forward, that kind of fades away a little bit, and as you reach the kind of front corners of the palate, there's a good little bit of a kind of floral, aromatic quality to the beer as well. So yeah, but I wouldn't describe this beer as being like piney and resinous or whatever. It's just quite a nice floral aromatic quality you get with this one, which I think works very, very well. But then yeah, round the front curve of the palate, the beer, it does develop a nice, I would say, it does develop a nice little bit of a lighter kind of grassiness to it, if that makes sense. You do get a nice bit of grassiness kind of coming out of the beer, and that kind of lingers there the further you go into the aftertaste. The grassy and floral notes kind of mix in a bit, and you can feel this beer's got a little bit of zestiness to it the further that you go into the aftertaste. But as I always say, on that front third of your palate, that's where you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. And if you go towards that border region between middle third and front third of your palate, there is just a wee bit of like an almost bitiness. You can feel that it's a little bit, I think the yeast is playing a bit of a role there. I think the yeast is contributing to the fruity notes in this beer. But yeah, at the back of that front third of your palate, you can feel there is quite a little bit of a zest, a citrusy zest to the beer. Then as you move further forward, it kind of mellows out a little bit, and then the further forward you go, you get a really nice kind of you start to get that kind of more oily tangerine note out of this one, but it's quite a zesty tangerine note, this one, especially for Mosaic. So that's what makes me say that I think the yeast is contributing a little bit, because you almost get a little bit of a kind of lemony zest on the very tip of the tongue with this beer. You get one or two little pineapple flavours in the middle of that kind of front third of your palate as well. There is a little bit of a kind of pineapple-y note coming out of it as well. But yeah, front tip of your tongue, there is a very nice kind of sort of lemony zesty type quality to the beer, I have to say. So I really like how everything goes together in on the fruity side of this beer. So thumbs up, as I say, to Fermenterarna for how this beer's turned out. Again, it's a very, very solid, you know, New England hazy IPA. It's definitely more of a New England one, this, than a West Coaster or whatever, but it's quite a I find this one to get more and more zesty and sort of more wheaty the further that you go into the aftertaste. But again, the overall vibe of the beer is quite slick in my mind. So I think that sums up the kind of flavour profile of this beer quite nicely. But yeah, let's just round off with the mouthfeel then. So yeah, I would say that this beer is pretty much right in the middle of the spectrum. It's a mid-bodied beer. Smooth carbonation, slight oiliness to it, very, very slick in a lot of ways, and yeah, I really like how this one goes together. The kind of malty and kind of hoppy side of this beer, I think, just they complement each other very, very well. So I'd say that overall, in terms of hoppy bitterness, this beer I think is your fairly standard 30 IBUs. The malt base is very, very smooth and quite slick. It gets a bit more bitey the further you go into the aftertaste. The fruits have a little bit of oiliness to them, quite a bit of zest though. And just overall, this is a very, very kind of drinkable beer in my mind. So another absolutely solid one from Fermenterarna, and I look forward to trying a few more IPAs from these guys in the near future. Just before filming this video, I made my February order from Systembolaget, so I think there was one or two more beers from Fermenterarna actually, so you can look forward to those. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one, and I hope that you guys enjoyed my take on it as well. So another solid beer from Fermenterarna, and these guys I think might well be a brewery to watch over the course of 2021. So let's leave it there. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Fermenterarna. Like I said, we will return to these guys very soon, but in the meantime, this one was the Keep On Climbing 6.5% IPA single hop with Mosaic from Fermenterarna in Strömstad in Västra Götaland, very close to the Norwegian border on the Swedish west coast. Slange, skål, cheers, and catch you guys with another Fermenterarna beer very, very soon.